There is a moment when the air shifts, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough for them to feel it in their chest before they understand it in their mind. It's the moment they realize you're not like them. Up until then, they were comfortable. They placed you in a category that made sense to them. Predictable, reachable, explainable. Someone who needed approval, who adjusted, who softened their edges to fit the room. They spoke freely around you because they thought you were safe, harmless, familiar. And then something changed. You stopped reacting the way they expected. You stopped over-explaining yourself. You stopped trying to be understood, not out of anger, not out of pride, out of clarity. You became quieter but heavier. Your words carried less emotion and more weight. Your silence stopped being empty and started feeling deliberate. You didn't rush to defend yourself. You didn't correct every misunderstanding. You let assumptions sit where they landed. That's when the discomfort begins. Because people don't fear aggression the way they fear restraint. They don't fear loud dominance. They fear control. They fear someone who can walk away without flinching. Someone who doesn't need to be validated to remain steady. They begin replaying interactions in their head, looking for signs they missed, wondering when the balance shifted, wondering if it was always this way, and they were simply too distracted to notice. You didn't announce your difference. You revealed it by subtraction, by removing the need to be liked, by removing the urge to explain, by removing the habit of shrinking to keep others comfortable. And now they feel exposed, because when you stop explaining yourself, you stop giving people leverage. Every explanation is a door. Every justification is a handle. When those disappear, so does their sense of control over you. They test you after that. Subtle comments, light disrespect, small provocations designed to pull the old version of you back into the room. They want reassurance that you're still the same, that you'll react, that you'll care. But you don't. You observe. You measure. You let them show you who they are when they feel uncertain. And that uncertainty eats at them, because deep down, they understand something they'll never say out loud. You're operating on a level they can't access anymore, not because you're better, but because you're no longer available to their games. And once they sense that, there's no going back. From that point on, everything you do feels amplified to them. Your calm feels unnatural. Your patience feels calculated. Even your kindness makes them uneasy because it no longer comes with weakness attached to it. You're not trying to earn a place. You're choosing whether a place deserves you. They start watching you more closely, listening not just to what you say, but to what you don't. They notice how you don't rush to fill silence, how you let conversations breathe even when it makes others uncomfortable, how you don't chase momentum. You allow it to come to you. This is where the shift becomes irreversible. People rely on emotional predictability to feel safe. They need to know which button to press to get a reaction. When those buttons stop working, anxiety replaces confidence. They don't know where they stand with you anymore, and that loss of position feels like a threat. You've removed yourself from the emotional economy they live in. No bargaining, no defending, no performing, just presence. And presence, when it's grounded, is unsettling. They begin projecting. They tell themselves you've changed, that you're cold now, distant, arrogant. They need a story that explains why they feel smaller in your presence. It can't be that you grew. It has to be that you became something negative. So they test boundaries again. A joke that crosses the line. A comment meant to lower your status in the room. A subtle attempt to remind you where they think you belong. You don't react, not because you didn't notice, but because you did. And that's what breaks the pattern. When you respond emotionally, you give them confirmation. When you respond intellectually, you give them a debate. But when you respond with controlled indifference, you give them nothing to stand on. They feel it instantly, that hollow space where influence used to be. This is when respect starts to replace familiarity. And for some people, that's unbearable. Familiarity gives them access. Respect puts distance between you and them. It creates hierarchy without you ever claiming authority. You never raised your voice. You never demanded anything. You simply stopped negotiating your value. And now, every interaction feels heavier to them. Because they understand, even if they can't articulate it, you're no longer playing the same game. You're not trying to win. You've already stepped outside the board. And that's the kind of difference people don't forget. Once they feel that distance, something subtle but permanent settles in. They begin measuring themselves against you, even when you're not in the room. Your name enters conversations you never asked to be part of. Your actions are analyzed, your silence interpreted, your absence felt more strongly than your presence ever was before. This is how quiet dominance forms. You're no longer competing for attention. You've become a reference point, and reference points don't chase. They anchor. What unsettles them most is that you didn't take anything from them. You didn't outshine them loudly. You didn't expose them publicly. You simply withdrew the energy they were feeding on, without resistance, without explanation, without drama. People can fight an enemy. They can negotiate with an equal. But they don't know how to handle someone who doesn't need them. That's when control starts shifting. They replay old interactions, looking for the moment they lost leverage. They remember when you stopped over-explaining, when you stopped justifying your choices, when you let misunderstandings exist instead of correcting them. Misunderstanding becomes power when you don't rush to fix it, because clarity benefits those who demand access to you. Ambiguity protects those who don't need approval. They sense it now. You're not hiding. You're not pretending. You're simply unavailable to manipulation. And that makes them cautious, careful, sometimes even respectful in a way they've never been before. You force them to approach instead of summon. This changes the dynamic in every environment. Social circles, workspaces, private conversations. The moment you stop explaining yourself, others start filling the silence with their assumptions. And most of those assumptions elevate you, not diminish you. Why? Because confidence doesn't explain, power doesn't rush, authority doesn't seek agreement. You're not trying to be understood by everyone anymore. You've accepted that being fully understood makes you predictable. And predictability is easy to control. They feel that unpredictability in you now. Not chaos, not instability, precision, restraint, intention. You choose when to speak. You choose when to engage. You choose when to leave. And those choices send a message without a single word being said. Some will admire it silently. Some will resent it quietly. Some will try to pull you back into the old dynamic. But none of them can ignore it. Because once people realize you're not like them, they also realize something more unsettling. You don't need to prove it. After that realization settles in, the behavior around you changes. They watch themselves when they speak to you. They soften their tone, hesitate before pushing, test boundaries they once crossed without thinking. Not because you demanded respect, but because your presence now implies consequences they can't quite define. You didn't threaten them. You didn't correct them. You simply stopped making yourself available. That absence of need rewires how people treat you. Those who once felt comfortable taking from you now feel exposed. They sense that whatever leverage they thought they had is gone. You're no longer reacting, no longer defending, no longer explaining your intentions. And without those signals, they lose their map. Power doesn't come from force. It comes from being unreadable. When you stop narrating your thoughts, others project their own fears onto your silence. They imagine strategies where there are none. They assume confidence where there is only certainty. And certainty is far more dangerous. You begin to notice it in small moments. A pause before they ask you for something. A change in posture when you enter the room. A question framed more carefully than before. These are tells. Instinctive responses to someone who cannot be casually influenced. You've moved out of the emotional economy. You no longer trade explanations for acceptance. You no longer exchange energy for validation. You conserve, you observe, you decide. That's when people start trying to win you back. Not openly, subtly. A compliment that feels delayed. An invitation that suddenly matters. An opinion that now seeks your approval. They're attempting to rebalance the dynamic, to return to a version of you that was easier to place. But that version is gone. You understand now that access is currency. And you don't hand it out just because someone asks nicely or loudly. You let people earn proximity through consistency, not pressure. This creates a quiet hierarchy. Those who respect your distance are allowed closer. Those who push against it are kept outside. And here's the part most people never realize. You don't need to announce this system. Others feel it instinctively. Humans are wired to recognize shifts in status, even when they can't explain why. You're not colder. You're clearer. You're not detached. You're deliberate. And in that deliberateness, you've become someone who can't be rushed, cornered, or casually dismissed. They know it now. You're no longer reacting to the world around you. The world is adjusting to you. Once the world starts adjusting to you, a strange reversal happens. People begin revealing themselves without being asked. The insecure try to provoke you, hoping to pull a reaction that restores their sense of control. The manipulative test you with half-truths, waiting to see if you'll fill the gaps for them. And the perceptive ones, they slow down. They listen. They realize you're not playing the same game anymore. This is where your advantage becomes permanent. You no longer rush to clarify misunderstandings. You let silence do the work. When someone projects their assumptions onto you, you don't correct them unless it serves you. Most of the time, it doesn't. Because confusion on their side creates leverage on yours. The moment you stop chasing alignment, alignment begins chasing you. People want to be understood. When you don't offer that understanding freely, they work harder to earn it. They explain themselves more. They justify their actions. They show you their motives in the process. You're not interrogating them. You're simply not rescuing them from their own words. That restraint filters your environment faster than confrontation ever could. Those who thrive on chaos get bored and move on. They can't stand being around someone they can't emotionally hook. Those who seek respect adjust their behavior. They become more precise, more honest, more intentional. And without trying, you've raised the standard of every interaction you're part of. This is the quiet discipline most people never master, knowing when not to respond. Every reply is a signal. Every explanation is a concession. When you understand this, you stop giving away information that can be used against you. You speak less, but when you do, your words land heavier. Because they're rare. Because they're chosen. You start noticing that people remember what you say. They quote you. They wait for your reaction before moving forward. Not because you're louder, but because you've trained them to pay attention. Power consolidates around consistency. You don't fluctuate emotionally. You don't swing between warmth and distance based on approval. You remain steady, predictable in your principles, unpredictable in your responses. That combination unsettles those who rely on patterns to control others. They can't rush you. They can't guilt you. They can't corner you into reacting, and slowly something shifts in how you see yourself. You stop measuring your worth by how well you're received. You measure it by how well you maintain your boundaries. You understand that not everyone deserves access to your inner world, and that understanding makes you untouchable. Not because you've built walls, but because you've learned exactly when to open the door. At this stage, the shift is complete. You no longer announce who you are. You let time and pressure reveal it for you. People feel it in how you move, how you pause, how you refuse to over-explain. There's a gravity to someone who doesn't need to convince. This is when respect stops being requested and starts being assumed. Those who once tested you now choose their words carefully. Not because you demanded it, but because they sensed consequences in your silence. You've become difficult to read, yet easy to trust. Calm, but not passive. Present, but never exposed. You've stepped outside the cycle most people live in. They react, you observe. They rush, you decide. They seek validation, you wait. And in that waiting, you control the tempo of every interaction. Here's the truth they rarely admit. People don't follow confidence. They follow certainty. Confidence can be loud. Certainty is quiet. It doesn't chase agreement. It doesn't argue its position. It allows others to arrive at the conclusion on their own. When someone realizes you're not like them, it's because you stopped playing their emotional games. You stopped feeding their need for reassurance, drama, or dominance. You became self-contained, and that is threatening to anyone who relies on external control. You don't need to dominate a room to lead it. You let others talk themselves into revealing where they stand. You listen for what isn't said. You notice hesitation, deflection, overconfidence. Patterns become obvious when you're no longer inside them. This is mastery without display. Now, one final decision determines whether this power stays dormant or becomes permanent. You must protect it. Not everyone deserves your attention. Not every moment requires your presence. Selectivity is not arrogance. It's survival at a higher level. The more intentional you become with your energy, the more effective every move feels. And if you're still here listening until the end, it means you're already different. So here's your call to action. If this resonated, don't scroll past it. Signal alignment. Like the video so it reaches those who need to hear it. Share it with someone who's ready to step out of reaction and into control. And if you want to keep sharpening this edge, subscribe and stay close. Because once you see the game clearly, you never play it the same way again.